All right, joining us now, E.J. Antoni, Heritage Foundation economist, Unleash Prosperity Hotline, and Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform. Gentlemen, I'm not going to talk about Vietnam unless you really want to. Today's tax day, and we want taxes to go down, supply-siders. But Scott Bessent's got himself kind of in a ringer. I'm not sure what he's up to, but he told Bloomberg everything's on the table for taxes on the wealthiest. He told our Edward Lawrence what's off the table is a $4.4 trillion tax increase. The Senate and the House are working with the administration to advance tax reform, blah, blah, blah. And corporate tax cuts will set off a manufacturing boom. But he didn't really address the individual tax hike. And I think that door's open. We are hearing President Trump has called Speaker Mike Johnson in favor of raising the top individual rate. Vice President J.D. Vance is in favor of raising the top individual tax rate. So far, Speaker Johnson, he was on this show, he's been on other shows, said he doesn't want to do that. Majority Leader Steve Scalise, likewise, does not want a higher top rate. I don't know. There may be other issues on that top rate. We'll get to the small business thing in one moment. But E.J. Antoni, you know, sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire. I hate to say it, but it doesn't look like anyone's denying it. And I don't see what the point is. If you raise the top rate on the Laffer curve, you're going to lose money. You're going to depress the economy. And politically, you could raise the top rate 20 points. And Democrats will say it's still a tax cut for rich people, EJ. So, like, I don't get the political or the economic logic of it seems like where the administration's going. Help me out here.
Well, Larry, the thing that comes to mind, actually, is when the Treasury Secretary was having his confirmation hearing and the Democrats were pressing him on this very issue, higher tax rates for high-income earners. And as he pointed out to, I think it was Pocahontas, he said to her, look, I'm not really concerned about your ideas of these amorphous topics like fairness. I'm concerned about collections. And the way we maximize collections is not by pushing these higher marginal rates, but by actually reducing rates. Look, the Treasury Secretary is an economic historian. He knows the record of history. When we bring these top marginal rates down, it does not result in everything the left says. It results in exactly the opposite, which would be faster economic growth and not only more overall tax revenue, but in particular, a larger share of tax receipts coming from top income earners. So I have to imagine that that is ultimately the direction that he's going to push these negotiations towards. Whether or not he has to say that in public is another thing, but I would say we have to read between the lines here.
Yeah, well, I think Scott Bessent was a supply-sider unless and until the higher-ups are telling him not to be such a supply-sider. You know, Grover, I mean, we know the top 1% of taxpayers pays 45%, some odd, of total income tax revenue. That's an extraordinary number. They basically pay half. All right, we're going to raise their tax rate again. I don't understand why. They're already paying a fortune, Grover. And then there's small business implications to this top rate, aren't there?
Yeah, Larry, President Trump is not going to allow the top rate for income taxes to be increased. That is a direct hit on small businesses. There was a letter that went to the Hill from 90 trade associations that represent small businesses pointing out that subchapter S corporations that pay through the individual rate would be badly hit. You read the list. This is a list of MAGA supporting industries: the National Roofing Contractors, the Precision Metal Formers, the Association Builders and Contractors, heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration. These are the people who make America work. President Trump is not going to get talked in. He's got some kids over in the White House pushing the idea that Trump is going to break his word and raise taxes. Trump has said again and again in the campaign that he wanted a tax cut for everybody, high income, low income, middle income, that he was going to take his tax cut and make it permanent. There was someone in the last election who wanted to not keep down the top rate. The name was Kamala Harris. That was her promise. The president said everyone gets a tax cut. Kamala Harris said, no, not the top rate. I know there's some kids over in the White House who think this is cute. They remind me of Dick Darman, who talked George Herbert Walker Bush into breaking his commitment that he wouldn't raise taxes, and it destroyed Bush's political career, The Republicans will not win the House of Representatives if they pass an attack on small businesses, medium-sized businesses, with this recommended tax increase.
Well, I've got faith
and they know that.
I've got faith in the president, but, EJ, I don't know why.
Yes.
Today's tax day, EJ. This would be a good day to say that there are going to be tax cuts, not tax increases. What they're doing is they're warbling around. There's a lot of doublespeak going on. There's a lot of tax-related word salad going on. Stuff about we're not going to take anything off the table. So you could say, well, on balance, this is going to be a tax cut, but we are going to raise the top rate. I mean, I don't know why they don't just come out and say it. That would make it very, very clear. And to Grover's point, it would also help small business. But wait, I don't know. I should go back to Grover. Grover, you're running ads, important ads. What about the SALT tax on corporations, the small tax on business, subchapter S companies, LLCs? What about that, Grover? Is that up in the air, too?
I don't think so at this point because, look, there's some people who don't seem to understand economics, and they've certainly never run a small business, and they don't know what Main Street looks like or how to find it on a map. And the tax increases they recommend, higher rates on individuals, which hits small businesses, and taking away the state and local tax deductibility for the corporate income tax. It's not like the individual SALT. You can't move a company. You can't move a oil processing company. You can't move an airline or a trucking company. You can move people, and those can discipline it. But the other would be a 2 to 3% increase in the rate for corporations, taking us higher than China's, in effect, higher than China. Why would we do that?
I don't know why. I can't imagine why we'd do that. EJ, I don't want you to be lonely. I got one for you, though. The bank earnings report today were very good. Banks beat the street on all their earnings. But one of the things that came out, a Wall Street Journal story, it's on the front of the website, is how good consumer spending continues to be. I find that very interesting. Now, of course, all these stories say, well, that's before the tariffs came out. But people have been talking about tariffs now for many months, not just the so-called Liberation Day. But the consumer looks pretty strong. Doesn't seem like a recession to me. What are you thinking, EJ?
Well, Larry, I think one of the reasons why the consumer has been so strong has been the willingness to take on debt. And now we see that showing up in these earning numbers from banks where they essentially have all of this revenue coming in from things like credit cards. So people have unfortunately had to grow their outstanding credit card balances. They're continuing to put more and more money on those credit cards. They can't pay it off. We're looking at about $350 billion a year in finance charges right now just on credit cards. That's not paying down credit card balances. Again, that's just the interest that folks are having to pay. And so I have to imagine going forward that unless we get some more momentum in terms of these supply side policies, that we're going to start to see the consumer take a hit. In other words, so much of their income is being allocated to things like debt finance that they're not able to continue sustaining these growth in spending numbers. Now, again, that's not to say this is some kind of doomsday scenario.
Yeah, you're not
we
sure
can get out of this mess with lower taxes, lower regulations.
Well, yes, indeedy, but you're not sure about the consumer. In other words, my point was the banks are reporting. You're saying it's all debt. It's not good consumer spending. It's debt-driven consumer spending. That's really a worse type scenario, EJ.
Right, Larry, and that's the big concern. If the consumer spending is growing because real incomes continue to grow, that's great news. Unfortunately, though, what we've had for almost 5 years now has been the cost of living greatly outpacing income growth. Yeah. And the result of that has been this huge swelling of consumer debt. So we have a big hole we got to dig ourselves out of here.
I tell you, Grover, I only got 20 seconds, but I'm just saying, I don't know. The administration should once and for all make a clear statement about the top income tax rate, about small businesses, about the SALT deduction for companies. Just clear this stuff up. You know what I mean? Everybody, it's going to take several months. It's going to take several months to get it passed.
Trump won the election.
Yes.
Trump won the election. Kamala Harris lost.
Yes.
We don't raise marginal tax rates like Kamala Harris wanted to. Trump won. We don't do that. Trump's not going to let that happen.
Boom. All right. Keep the faith. Grover's right. Grover Norquist, thank you.
He won.
Antoni, thank you very much.